Welcome back to the Weird and Strong podcast. Today we've got Aaron Adams, someone I'm always glad to have a conversation with. We discuss on how he shows up in the world in that space between nerd and jock, and how he's carried that from his younger years to his adult life. We had an absolute blast recording this episode for you. And now it's time to dive in and let's get weird. All right, here with Aaron Adams, one of my best buddies that I've met only through the internet, and I'm so happy to be here with him. It's been a while since we've chatted, and welcome, man.
Thanks, buddy. I'm excited. It's nice to talk to you on our actual recording that we get to go back on and listen to.
Listen to all the madness that comes out in all the conversations that we have had in the past. Where I look back and I'm like, what did we actually talk about for 2 hours? I'm not even sure.
Right? That happens so often too, where you're like, I don't actually know what we talked about, but it was good. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we do with all of our guests here on the Weird and Strong podcast, I got a weird question for you.
Okay.
One of my favorite ways to ask questions of people is in a would you rather. Ooh. So today you get a would you rather. Would you rather turn green when you're lying or break out in polka dots when you're mad?
Polka dots when I'm mad. Because it's like, you know when I'm mad. Like I'm usually like this, right? Like smiling, like goofy, like, oh, okay, you know. Like, it's very easy to see when I'm upset. Like, my whole demeanor changes. And lying, too. Like, it's not that hard to see if Aaron's lying. Usually, he just kind of makes a weird face and looks up and to the left a little bit and decides that, yeah, that's it. And then most of the time, my children are great at that. They'll, Daddy, are you lying? I'm like, yeah, I'm lying. I'm bullshitting you. I'm sorry.
I feel like we have that in common. When I first got started coaching, that was a comment from many people. It's like, you have the worst poker face in the world.
Yeah, by design.
Yeah,
it's like I'm not trying to lie. Like that's not a good talent I guess it is a good talent to have. It's something nice to keep in your back pocket. It's just not something that I want to bring into the world. Is more lying.
Yeah, exactly.
There's plenty. There's plenty.
Exactly.
Just turn on the TV. That's all it is.
Hell yeah. Well, and you know, as we get into it, we're talking about you already with your not wanting to lie and not being able to really hide it all that well anyways.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you. Let's talk about what makes Aaron Adams weird. What makes you unconventional? You know, you can tell stories. Paint us the picture.
All right. I think I found that this is less weird as time has gone on. So I used to think that being a World of Warcraft player and elite weightlifter, wrestler, who is very, very motivated by my opposing gender, but would still want to play Dungeons and Dragons on the weekend. And also go lift heavy shit and like throw stuff around and like be manly and chop wood to then go inside and nerd out with Legends of Zelda, because I just started playing that, which is, go buy that if you haven't.
It's on the list.
But there's this weird dichotomy though, and it felt like when I was growing up, right? Because we're about the same age. Mm-hmm. You grew up and you were either like a manly man or you weren't, and it was just you were these things.
Nerds
almost like
jocks.
lunch. Right. Like what lunch table did you sit at? Mm-hmm. And I always use that analogy was that I never had a lunch table. I would go around and I would consume my lunch with like my best friends or kids that were on like the wrestling team with me or whatever, even though we rarely ate lunch. But then after that, I would jump around and go to all these different cultures. Right. And that's how lunch tables are typically organized, is by culture. Mm-hmm. So you'd have like the nerds and like, these are the guys, you know, they're talking about video games, and then you have the science nerds who are talking about math and science. And I would go to all of those tables, but I would also go to the ones where it was like, oh, these kids are like, these, like, there's the drug dealers over there. And like, these are the bad kids. And I would just as easily go over there and have a conversation with them, because they were just as like besides all of the details around them, they were still good people. They weren't bad human beings. They just made different choices.
Yeah.
And I just never understood why I didn't have a table. And it was because they were all my table.
Yeah. How's that? How have you pulled that through from your high school world into your adult world?
Pretty well. Like there's a lot of memes going around right now and like different posts on like Instagram and TikTok about how like there's the outgoing male partner and then like the very shy female partner that's like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. Yeah. And I'm the guy that we just moved 2 weeks ago. I know all of my neighbors, both aside me, but across the street, behind me. I know them all. I know them all by name. They come outside, they yell out, "Hey, Aaron," like, and no one knows Megan's name at all. Like, they know all the kids, they know everything about it. Like, we have all these conversations, and Megan's just sitting there, like, "Oh, hi, yeah, I'm Megan."
How do they know our life story? I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, I mean, I just talk to them. I enjoy meeting different people from different walks of life because, I mean, I'm sure you believe this, but we all have more in common than we have not in common. Like most of us have a lot in common, and most of us think basically in the same zone. It's just some people might be a little bit more over here, a little bit more over here, but for the most part, everybody is like in the middle-ish. And there's always outliers, right? Just like in weightlifting, like there's outliers of strength, like there's the Lashas of the world, and you know, like we don't get that gift of having that kind of physical strength and speed. But for the most part, all of us are kind of in this like middle area. We're just a little bit more over here, a little bit more over here, whatever that is.
It's like to throw it back to like some of the D&D stuff. It's like if you have a stat, like everybody still has the same like stat categories. It's just that you shift it a little bit. Very rarely you're going to have somebody who has like a 0 in anything. Right.
Yeah. I mean, when you're developing a character, again, this is like back in the day, and you have a certain amount of attribute points, right? You're never going to make something 0. You're not going to make your strength 0. You're going to give it at least a 1, or your intelligence, right? A 1. And
like even if you're a wizard, you're like, I need to be able to lift this staff.
The staff,
like a strength requirement of 1 at least, like or carry something.
This is actually a really good analogy for life. It's the worst pain in the world is getting like an item that you can't wield, not because of your level, but because you overlook something in your past.
Yeah.
Right. Those early parts of the game, like that's why whenever you get attribute points, right, you never put them in right away. You just put in like the bare minimum you need to start, and then you start hoarding them and say, all right, where's this going to go? Where's this tree go? And how does this work?
I'm not going to hope for a respec item coming along the pipe. Yeah.
Yeah. For 10,000 units or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I just saw memes about this of like your 20s are like your tutorial session of being an adult. Your 30s are like accumulating all those experience points and putting them in different categories. And then you get to your late 30s, early 40s, and you go, what the hell did I do all that for? And then just like, well, I'm going to roll with it.
Yeah. And I mean, how many times, like, the nice thing about life though, too, is that we get to respec whenever we want. Like we're just talking about this before we hit record, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't, right? Like if I wanted to be a rogue, right? I was like, I'm a rogue. I'm just going to do heavy damage. I'm going to attack you from behind. Like it's going to be great. And then you get through the game and you're like, really? I want to be a paladin. It doesn't mean that you have to throw away everything that you learned from being a rogue, from being sneaky and doing this stuff. It just means that you need to make paladin more. Like you need to be a healer. You need to go and help people more. It doesn't mean you can't do that in a sneaky rogue way.
Yeah.
Right? Like we are a summation of all of our experiences. That doesn't mean you throw away bad experiences. It's like the same thing with regrets, right? Like, do we all have regrets? Yeah. But do you just not think about them anymore? Or do you actually take those in and digest them? And does that make you become a more wholesome person?
Or like you said, a more whole, even a whole person of like,
whole person. Yeah. There we go.
Because holding on, like the attachment to the regret, like I've found in my experience, not only for myself, but in others, like that's the thing that holds you back, keeps you stuck. Where it's like,
it's fear.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you talked about this as like from a life perspective, that people can make those changes for themselves. They can respec at any time that they want. Like, have you ever run into a person who hasn't believed that for themselves? Like, I'm 40 years old and I've been in this career and I hate it, and this is my only path forward.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think there's more people that I know, especially now being in academia, that are just miserable.
Yeah.
And they have been for decades. I'm like, why don't you just go do something else? Like, what am I going to do? Do whatever the fuck you want. Like, what is holding you back? Like, but then I want to lose this and lose this. And it's the same thing. It's the fear of leaving, right? It's the, what is it called? Battered wife syndrome, right? Where the reason that they don't leave is because of the fear for something unknown. When the known is actually like, well, I'd rather sit here and be miserable than go safe. Out. Right. Is it safe though? Right. Yeah, like, exactly. Is it, are you living your life to the fullest? Especially being in the Bible Belt where everyone like really like, and if you love Jesus, that's fine. Like, that's cool. Or whatever God you want. But like, for the ones that really love Jesus and really talk about this gift of life that they get, I'm like, you're really squandering it.
Yeah. You have a lot more out there that you could be living and a lot more that you could be experiencing. And, you know, it calls back to like earlier versions of humans of like, think about like what, not even 200 years ago, not even 100 years ago, most people died not venturing more than 20 miles from their own home.
Yeah.
Like that
happens a lot now.
Yeah.
I mean, think about like, you're still in Fargo?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many people do you know that literally have never left Fargo? They are born and raised. Right.
A good handful. Yeah. They're like, they're like, oh, we went to Detroit Lakes, which is 30 minutes away, like 40 miles. That's as far as we go. Might venture to Minneapolis from time to time, but that's the big city. That's really scary.
Right. Yeah. And it's the same kind of concept. It's that fear of the unknown. And I was lucky because of my Olympic lifting and stuff, I was able to travel the world basically for free from a very, very young age. Like, I think I started traveling internationally in like 2002. Cool. So I was 14, 13. So I got to experience all of this. Like, I didn't have a choice. It wasn't like, oh, stay where you're safe. It was like, nah, dude, you got to go out here and compete and you better bring it. Cause if not, you're not on the team again.
Well, I'm sure before that you were going nationally all over the place as well.
National
events and national meets and things like that.
When I first started, I was a wrestler, right? So, and in wrestling, it's very localized. Like, you want to be the state champion, right? Like, that's the big thing. And like, I was from New Jersey. I still am from New Jersey. I'll never deny. I am from New Jersey. So I'm from New Jersey, right? And then like the big place to go for states was Atlantic City. Yeah. It was like that was the big stage. And some kids looked their whole life to go 30 minutes away from where I live. Yeah. That was, and then with weightlifting, I started getting really good at weightlifting and wrestling at the same time. And it was like, now we're going to Maryland. And now we're going to go for weightlifting. Now there's this meet in Ohio we got to go to. It's like called the Arnold or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and then all of a sudden that small mindedness of let's make it to Atlantic City expanded and expanded and expanded until, you start traveling and you realize how small the world is and how much your own perceptions of like what is totally false. Yeah. And then you start relearning like, oh, this is how the world is. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I was just talking to Mark England a little bit yesterday, and he said something that reminded like the definition of mindset. It's a collection of the stories that you tell yourself. And
say that again. Hold on. Time out. Say that again. It's the
collections of stories that you tell yourself.
Real quick, can we unwrap this a little bit together?
Absolutely, 100%. Love it.
I love the word stories because that's all they are. They're made up, right? I remember a teacher telling me this in grad school, said his mother died very tragically when he was very, very young. And the story that he told himself was that my mother is an angel and now she will protect over me the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Another story could be that he was abandoned by his mother because she was drunk driving or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Those are the same phenomena happened, right? His mother is gone. The story that we tell impacts who we are as people for the rest of our lives. Yeah. If you want to change your mindset, change your story.
100%.
I'm sure that's what he was saying.
It is. And that's a big component of my coaching practice is that story work and helping people with those stories. Mm-hmm. We haven't got to talk about all of that with my adventure over the past year, but that's a big component of it. It's like, well, say he did believe the story of my mom abandoned me because X, Y, and Z. If that's the story you told yourself, that's the story you believe. You made the choice to believe it. Ergo, you also have the choice to believe something else and make a new story about it.
Favorite question. How does that serve you?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, this happened. Okay, how does that serve you? Because it very well may, right? Some of the things that we learned from that internal struggle of the stories that we tell, the narratives, or that we're very resilient to change, or we can keep our emotions in check very easily, or at least push them down very effectively, right? And part of that, yeah, you're laughing because it's the same thing. and part of that, yeah, is learning how to open that. Talk about respect. That's what you've been doing over the past year.
Yeah.
You basically found that coin that was like, hey, you can respect now if you want. You chose it, and then you said, oh, I'm going to tell this story from now on. Mm-hmm. Now I'm this person. Yeah. And people that knew you 20 years ago are now going to be like, who the fuck is this Jeremy, dude? Like, that's not the same guy I knew.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of life. Every time somebody meets you, you should be the best version of yourself that you could possibly be at that time. And no matter what, you are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You are that best person, period. End of story.
Yeah. Because, and this is something that related to what you were talking about earlier of like this feeling or this pressure of this story of like talking about the people in academia that want to change, but they don't know. They're like, well, no, I'm stuck here. Mm-hmm. Because like this idea of like a sunk cost fallacy.
Oh man. Yeah.
Or also, I mean, because I've caught myself in this thought trap and thought loop before as well of, well, I'm going to be 30 years old or 40 years old very soon, and I haven't done X, Y, and Z. Or like I have this pressure to have a certain achievement associated with their age. Or like,
and no one actually told you to have that, by the way.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
They told themselves that. And also like there is this rush towards the finish line for it. That you were talking about this from that location perspective of where Atlantic City was Everest. And then all of a sudden you realize there's another Everest behind it and another Everest behind it. And like, it's about that journey to continually discover those next peaks and those next things. Yep. Whereas we get attached to, oh, I'll be happy when I get to state at Atlantic City. Yeah. Like we have this finalization in our brains around this.
Yeah.
It's like,
you ever watch the Peaceful Warrior?
I haven't actually.
What?
I'm going to write it down right now.
Oh my God. Buy it and watch it tonight. That's the whole point of it. There's this, it's interesting that you use the mountaintop thing because there's something called a heuristic. Mm-hmm. We've talked about heuristics before. And that's the biggest thing. That is like the analogy for a heuristic. It's you get to Everest and then all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh shit, there's another mountain out there that's even higher. Whereas in reality, what we should be doing is going halfway up the mountain, looking around and seeing, is there any other higher peaks around here? Mm-hmm. And then going to that. And not being scared that, oh, well, I'm already down this path. Mm-hmm. So what? You're gonna live to 80, more likely than not.
Yeah.
Like if you're 40, you're only halfway there. Like just go do something stupid. Go try something. Why not?
Well,
what is the absolute worst that's going to happen?
Or what's the best that's going to happen?
That's the other
That's a
one.
better question to ask. Of like, if I go down this path, what's the best thing that could come of this?
Right.
And because
the worst is you fail. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah. You know, usually what I find is people who are really afraid of that haven't really failed yet.
Yeah.
They haven't fallen down first. They haven't taken that first punch to the face.
Yeah. That's one thing I love about weightlifting, and I think we've talked about this before, is that it's a sport built on failure.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you know if you can lift 405 pounds is to try it and either fail at it or succeed. Yeah. And then guess what?
Add more.
Now you need to go to 410. Yeah. Because you don't know if that's your max. It's the whole sport is built on what you can't do. That is the definition of it. Like that's how you know how high you can go, is by what you have failed at. Mm-hmm. And once you learn that failure is a part of that process and that you're married to it, then the failures become not a big deal. It's like, oh, I couldn't hit X, Y, or Z today. Like, okay, cool, interesting. It's just more data.
Exactly. I just did I had one of those timeline Facebook things pop up of 4 years ago, preparing for the North Dakota state meet, which was really tiny. Because I think it was the first one that we had ever had.
And all 12 people from North Dakota showed up.
I think it was less than 12 people, actually.
Wow. Okay. That's funny.
There were 3 guys. So I was the only person, like 3 different weight classes, just 3 guys, and like 2 kids and like 4 ladies. So close to 12, but not quite. But I was so like, I had just gotten my level 1 certificate. Like I'd been really putting all this focus. I was training seriously. I had all this attachment to coming out as like feeling really great about this. Mm-hmm. I bombed out for the first time.
You got it done early.
Yeah. And had to drive from Bismarck, North Dakota to Fargo, North Dakota by myself with that. And like that victimhood was rampant. I didn't know how to handle it at the time.
Yeah. So
it started to become a story about me and not just something that I like experienced.
Yeah.
Like, I did all this work. I did all this stuff. I had all this effort and I failed. My parents were there. They saw me fail. Oh my God. How horrible.
They saw you fail way before that.
I know, right? Many times in many ways. And fast forward to, like I talked about this a little bit in the post, like fast forward to last July, I competed at a meet down at Brian Derwin's gym. And I bombed out the same thing. Couldn't get my jerks in line. Just wasn't, my timing was off, something. Walked away from that bomb out having the best time of my life.
Yeah.
Because I completely removed myself from failure, meaning it like failure, quote unquote, in this meet, meaning anything about me. I still showed up. I had a blast with a bunch of fun people.
Yeah. Shit didn't work out. Whatever.
Yeah. Move on.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing as being tied to that destination versus being tied to the journey. So when you watch Peaceful Warrior, you'll be like, oh, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my first bomb out was at Junior Worlds in the Czech Republic, and my mother and father flew out there, spent like 7 days beforehand. And they actually bought a shirt that said I went to Prague, and all I got was the stupid T-shirt. And I was like, Dad, come on, man.
Rub some salt in there for a little bit.
He's like, yeah, you bombed out, whatever. And I think I bombed out in clean and jerks, which is like so rare. Like I was so good at clean and jerk. And I remember like, it didn't bother me. Mm. Like other people were like, oh man, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Why? Like, well, you bombed out at Junior Worlds. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I'm well aware. I'm right here. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, you don't feel any, like, no, I don't. I mean, it happens. Like, I'm glad that it doesn't happen to me as often as other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Like, at least I got here and then I failed. Whatever. Would it have made a difference if I would have lifted and got dead last? Would I have felt any different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Like, because I've done that too. I've gone to Worlds and gotten literally dead last. Like the last. The very bottom of the bottom was Aaron Adams. So it's like, I mean,
which which you're not used to with your name of being at the bottom.
Yeah, that hurt. Like that one hurt way more than the bomb out. The bomb out, I could be like, oh well, if I would have made it, I would have got third. Which wasn't true at all. But like going down, it's like, no, I tried hard and I got last. Like they're like, yeah, but you're better than everybody else in the U.S. I'm like, no. That's nice.
On shit mountain.
Good. Yeah, like shit, man. But those are the points, though. It's exactly what we're talking about. Like those failures and stuff. It's just part of it. It's just a thing. And then the story that you tell about it was really the reality that it is. And the best thing about it is that you get to change that every time. Like every time you pull that memory out, it's like clay. Right? No matter, and it's any memory, by the way. It doesn't matter what memory it is. As soon as you go back and recall that memory, you've put your fingerprints on it again and dirtied it up just a tad bit. Yeah. So the story that you keep telling about how your dad didn't care or love you or anything like that, whatever it is, every time you bring that out, you either give it a little bit more of dad didn't care, or you could take out a little bit of the maybe dad did care, right? And then you could change the whole story. You just throw that piece of clay away and get a new one and just say, dad didn't know how to care. He was never taught how to care. Yeah. His father just beat the shit out of him.
He did the best that he could with what he had.
Yeah, like in reality, man, dude did pretty good job based off of zero knowledge, right? It's not like fathering books didn't really exist in the 80s. I mean, I'm sure they did, but no one read them. Yeah, they probably should have. But it wasn't like that was like a thing that any dad was doing back then, really. Like, okay, well, you start changing that narrative now, and then you've taken that piece of clay and you've turned it into something else.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that work for myself. In many ways, I've seen that work with other people. That exact scenario. I was working with another coach in the unlifted community. Did it's called the Ancestors course. I was looking at like familial stories of this. Like, what have we inherited, whether we are conscious of it or not?
Yeah.
And I had him.
If we're conscious of it.
Yeah. And so he didn't really feel like he had a major, like we started in one route and then we went to a completely different route where he didn't really have a lot of strong feelings about his paternal grandfather. And I started asking questions about his dad and things that his dad did. And we started going down that rabbit hole of some of those things. And I said, well, why do you think your dad did those things? Like, why do you think he acted that way? He said, well, he didn't have an example. His dad was never around. His dad never did this and that and not the other. And I was like, let's try something.
And there it is. Yeah.
Hypothetically, let's have you write a letter to your grandfather as if you are your dad.
Ooh.
Yeah, we opened that one up and found a bunch of stuff in there. And
gems.
We turned that story on its head completely. He's like, I feel this connection and love towards my grandfather that I've never had in my entire life. He's like, I never met the man ever. I've only seen a couple pictures. I've only heard stories. And now all of a sudden I have this compassion and love for him that I've never had before. I'm like,
see, I had the same type of thing, but the opposite. Everybody always talked about my grandfather, how he was like, oh, your grandfather would have loved you so much, Aaron. He'd been so proud of you. He would have done this. And my dad died in March. Yeah. So when the family got back together, we all started talking about my grandfather. And this is my grandfather on my mother's side, too. Okay. So this isn't even on my dad's side. This is a completely different side of the family. But everybody came in to show. And, we started sitting there talking. I'm like, well, tell me something about, like, my grandfather, because I never got to meet him. He died on my birthday, like 10 or 15 years before I was born.
Okay.
So they always like explained it as like, you're the reincarnated Vernon. Like, that's who you are. And I started hearing all these stories about how much of an asshole he was. Like, I mean, just like mean. I mean, he would throw fits. He would be angry. He would throw tools, plates. And I'm like, what?
It's a completely different version than what I was told.
Yeah. But the best part about it, and I was like, well, that makes sense. That's where I want to do. Like, that's my initial reaction when someone says, or like, yeah, I just want to break it. Just want to throw it, yell, scream, all that. Like, oh. Okay, so that got passed down, and I had no idea. So then it's that generational trauma that you're trying to like unpack, and it's like, I didn't even know this guy. Apparently he was an asshole, right? But in my mind, I'm like, maybe he was an asshole like me. Maybe he just was misunderstood and didn't know how to communicate his feelings the way that I can communicate my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he was a really good person who just cared a lot about things. It wasn't that he was angry. Like the anger comes from other things, of things not being right. Right. That's like the justice. Well, it's like anger comes a lot of times from justice. Right. So when you think about justice, it's like is desserts. Did people get what they deserved? And if they didn't get what they deserved, a lot of times you get really angry about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like if I come home and I ask Megan to clean the kitchen or something. Hey, I left some dishes out, or the kids left dishes out. Can you clean this up while I'm at work? And then when I get home, it's not done. I'm angry because, right, this is the justice. I said to, like, I needed this done for me to feel good, and now it's not done. And then therefore this is anger. Well, in reality, right, that could be a whole bunch of different things. I could come home and just completely break down and cry because it's overwhelming. So now instead of anger, it's overwhelm. And now I'm crying because I feel oppressed, because everything feels like it's crunching in on me, right? These are all different emotions all around that same, what we're just talking about, phenomena.
Yeah.
They're fucking dishes.
Yeah.
It's going to take me 30 seconds to clean the damn dishes. Like, do I really care that much? No, I'll just do the dishes. Not a big deal. Right. But it goes back to this whole like emotion, and then the story that we tell about emotion instead of the why did that emotion come up?
Yep. Because most of us in, especially the Western world, just the world in general, we look to stuff that down. I don't want to experience that emotion. I'm going to pack that thing away, put a story along with it, or in that's, hypothetical like that, get angry, still do the dishes, but hold a grudge about it.
Yeah. I don't get angry. I love people like that. I don't get angry. I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like the way you say it?
You don't have an emotion. You don't have an emotion that is present in all humans that don't have a lobotomy.
Yeah, exactly. In acupuncture school, right, we learn this, there's 5 emotions. And you experience all of those emotions, and you show all of those emotions. Just some people show them a little bit more, a little bit less, and that becomes your like constitutional factor. But like one of the things, my favorite things is people that are like, I don't feel anger, are really, really good at shoving anger down. And then what does that become? It becomes heartburn, cancer, like all these like long-term chronic diseases that they don't understand
Depression
why.
And
And then, depression's a lot of depression actually is that overwhelm and that inability to feel like, it feels buried, right? Like a lot of people go, and this is why I ask people when they'll say like, I just have anxiety about it. I say, what does the anxiety feel like? Because the word that you use for anxiety isn't the same word that I use for anxiety. It feels different in me. So it's like, oh, well, I feel like a rising in my chest and heat. And I'm like, you're angry. Go break a plate. Go throw, like, tell somebody why that's not okay. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they do it and they're like, oh, I feel like I can take a deep breath. Like, it's crazy, right? Now that anxiety isn't there because the anxiety, the word, which is a really easy Band-Aid that doesn't mean anything. You smack it on there and there it is. It's anxiety. Just give me some Xanax, right?
It could be another story you tell yourself about yourself. I am anxious. I have anxiety. I have depression.
That's my favorite one. I have it. Like somebody walked up and gave you this gift of anxiety. Like, here you go. Here's some anxiety. And you're like, oh, thanks, man. Love this.
I'm going to carry this everywhere I go.
Yeah. When in reality, you're like, I chose to be anxious. Right? I chose to be anxious in that moment. Why? Yeah. Like I chose to feel overwhelmed. Well, because I didn't know how to do anything else. It was funny. About a year ago, I was living in Louisiana, and Megan and the kids were still in New Jersey before we had moved.
Yep.
So I was feeling very lonely at this one point in time. And I remember talking to her and a couple other people and like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I'm like, what I'm feeling right now is quite literally depressed. Like, I feel like I don't have people here. I feel very alone and everything, but it's okay. Like in about a week, this is going to go away and subside and it'll be fine. So in the meantime, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to not work as much. I want to stay home, play some video games, like go back to some of the things that comfort me. And I was like, in about a week, I'll be okay. And everyone was like, what the What? I'm like, yeah, like very like cognizant of what my emotions were because I had a lot of practice with them. And it wasn't like, it wasn't my parents. It wasn't like, I didn't learn this shit till grad school. When I went to acupuncture school, when it was like, oh, here are all these emotions and things. Here's how you flex that muscle.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, I can just be okay with feeling this emotion. And eventually it'll actually just go away on its own.
Actually experience it instead of try to control it and shove it somewhere and get rid of it.
I don't like this feeling. Like, well, it's going to keep coming back every time you don't like this feeling. So just feel it.
It's going to come as a feather or a Mack truck. Make your choice.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? How many times do we keep pushing that life lesson away, and then it just comes back harder and harder. Yep. Harder and harder and harder and harder. It's like, you're going to learn this lesson, dude, whether you like it or not.
Keep showing up for a reason.
Yeah, it's a good reason usually.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's a shitty reason, but sometimes it's something you have to deal with. Like you you have to get through that. Like I know I talked about my dad already because it's still very charged, right? Like I never lost a parent before. But one of the things we were talking about the other day, I was like, oh man, like I wish my dad was here. We could build this fence and everything and all that. And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, no, we wouldn't. I like looked at Megan and I was like, there's no way I would do that. I was like, think about it. Like I would tell him I was doing it. I would not ask for help because it would turn into an argument, like all this stuff. I would just build the fence. I would ask for some like opinion here or there, but there's no way we would have interacted in building the fence because it would have ended both of us at each other's throats.
Throwing hammers at each other.
Yeah. And like, that's the reality. But again, I can tell the story of, oh, look how great this would be. Look how wholesome it would be. Like, oh, daddy's son. And it's like, that's not the real thing. Like me and my dad had problems, right? Like we had struggles. We had a lot of learning going on. And then like he died. Awesome. Now I get to do that.
Yeah.
Now I get to be that person for my son. And I get to try to do all of those things and really take like affirmative action and trying to do these different aspects of fatherhood that I wish that I had. And I get to make my own mistakes.
Yeah.
And I get to say, I'm sorry when I'm 45 or 50. Like that's kind of the beauty of life is that you get to constantly be adapting and changing all the time. And when you don't, you die.
Yeah. It all comes for us one way or another.
Yeah, you ain't gonna avoid it, so might as well keep going.
Yeah, you were talking about something like you brought a little bit of it up, answering my questions before I can even ask them. Talking about like actually, it's all good. No, I love it when that happens because it means we're on the same wavelength, like on so many of these things. You were talking about that, like experiential with the emotions, like learning to actually feel the emotions and not getting that until grad school. And you would ask the question of like, of when you're feeling anxious, what does that feel like? How often when you ask questions like that, does it come up with I don't know?
Oh, all the time. That was my best coaching cue ever. When I first started coaching weightlifting, somebody would do a snatch and I'd be like, what did you feel?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, that was bad. And I would say, that's a judgment. I didn't ask you for a fucking judgment. Opinion. I asked you how it felt. Yeah. How did it feel? Well, it felt bad. I'm like, no, try again. What did you physically feel in your body when that, like, let's start over. Like, what did you feel on your feet? Well, I felt my foot on the floor. Awesome. Now we're starting, right? Now all of a sudden we brought that awareness down and now we can feel our feet. We have feet. Isn't that awesome that we have feet? Okay. Now let's start to feel how this is going on that foot. But it's the same thing, right? All that is, all any sport is, it's just holographic, right? Like, hologram, you cut a little piece of it and then all of a sudden it's the same image, right? Just in a different form. So it's all holographic. You can chop it any way. But sports is just like life. Life is just like sports. You're going to run into the same struggles no matter what. So how do we do that, right? So, okay, like what does anxiety feel like? I have no idea. It's just a word that I use. Okay, so let's unpack that, right? Where do you feel it? I feel it like in my, and they'll reach for their throat and say chest. Okay, so it starts in your chest and it goes to your throat. So it's moving up, right? Yeah. Okay. Hot or cold? Hot, right? Is it expansive or contracting? Right. And you start to diagnose
a color,
going down
a shape, a texture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, is it sharp? And like, it's the same thing with pain, right? Like, how many different types of pain are there?
And that's like
Right?
an entire practice of medicine around that.
Yeah. What kind of pain is this? Is it a hot pain? Is it a stabbing pain? Is it a dull pain? Like, we have all these different pain scales. Yeah. And it's the same thing with anxiety. Like, I have like 5 different types of anxiety. Right. And all it is just where it starts, where does it go? How does it move? Right. And you start to diagnose these things. And then all of a sudden, I mean, this happened the other day in the gym. So I'm coaching a collegiate athlete. She just graduated, and she had pain in her hip. Okay. Which is like, I've been working on this girl. She like holds everything in a whole lot, lots of emotions and everything. Will not give those emotions up. Right. And she's like, I hurt my hip. I can't lift my knee. Now I've torn my hip flexor in this exact motion, like where I can't lift my knee. And I'm like, okay, listen, I'm like, I'm not trying to scare you. It might be torn and you might be out for a little bit. Huge overwhelm. I mean, like out of nowhere, just tears. I mean, and not like crying down the sides of the eyes. I mean, sobbing like right. And this has nothing to do with the hip, right? She's not in that much pain that she's crying like that. I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to this corner of the gym, right? All right, we're sitting down talking. For 25 minutes, she didn't say one word. I just sat there silently next to her and just bared witness to her emotion. I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't scared. I wasn't going to get distracted. I looked this girl dead in the eyes for 25 minutes as she just cried. Finally, we go through and it's like, okay, I want you to say, and I forget exactly what the phrasing was, but like, I am strong, I am capable, I'm confident, something like that, right? Yeah. That's all I want you to say. And then out of nowhere, she says something along the lines of, how can I forgive everybody else if I can't forgive myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That all that emotion, all that stuff just stems from that one physical pain that led all the way through to, can I forgive myself?
Yeah. Or then translating that and changing that into, I could forgive myself, leading yourself up to, I can.
Yeah. Oh, that's what we do. One of the things that we did in acupuncture school was an exercise called Could You, Would You, When? I don't know. Do we ever talk about this?
No, I don't think so. It's very similar to some of the language games we play on the elliptic
I'm sure.
side.
I can almost guarantee that like the guys that you're learning from were learning from the same people I went to acupuncture school with. All
of this stuff is so interconnected. Like the more I talk to more people across all kinds of different methods, and it's like nothing's new here. It's just a slightly different flavor. Just like we were talking about at the beginning of this, to call it all back, is that there are more things in common than there are different. We can put labels like acupuncture or like psychotherapy. Like all of these things have a core component, which is relational, me reflecting something that you say back to me, and you having a reaction to it, and then seeing what we can do to change that reaction or manipulate it in some way.
Yeah, these exercises are at least 4,000 years old. But,
yes.
One of the things we do is it's called Could You, Would You, When? And the goal is to get to yes, yes, now.
Okay.
So it would be, could you forgive yourself? Right? No, can't do it. Right? Okay, it's fine. Could you forgive yourself for 15 minutes? Nope, can't do it. Right? And you get down to 5 seconds. Right? Can you forgive yourself for 5? Anybody can do something for 5 seconds. It's like, that's not that hard, right? I can hold my breath for 5 seconds, whatever it is. Okay. Could you forgive yourself for 5 seconds? Yeah. Would you forgive yourself for 5 seconds? I don't know. Right. And then, okay. All right. Let's go through it again. Okay. Let's see how this goes. All right. What about for 3 seconds? Could you forgive yourself for 3 seconds? Yeah. Would you forgive yourself for 3 seconds? All of a sudden if you're doing this practice with us, right, you can already feel the chest, right? You should already be able to feel that. Yes, I could forgive myself for 3 seconds. When will you do it? Now. And then I count 1, 2, 3. And then everybody goes, oh. And it's like, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
It's just the could you, would you, when. And it's a practice, right? You don't have to, like, same thing with depression or anything like that. Like, listen, you can have this back as soon as we're done this exercise. If you want to feel shitty about yourself again, you can have it right back. Don't worry, it'll be there. It's not going to go away. Right? Like,
you can always dig that up like an old toy in the backyard or something. Like, bring it out, buried in a closet somewhere. It's going to show up from time to time. You know?
Don't worry about it. It'll, like, you can have it right back. It's your gift, right?
Yeah.
Like, someone gave that to you, so I mean, you might as well hold on to it, and you can always have it back. But that's one of those like really good practices that I think are overlooked, and they're very, very simple, and in the moment they're very frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, especially when you have somebody like you or I who's kind of like edging you on, because, you know, we're assholes in the best way possible, right?
Yeah.
And we're egging you on, but I'm also not scared. I'm not scared of your emotion. I'm not scared of all, because I know that anger is just the way that you express whatever. Like, that's fine. You can be angry. I don't mind you being, you can yell. Okay. I can take it. Big deal. Been yelled at my whole life.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I can hang, right? Now we have a rapport. I'll sit there. And that was the whole point of sitting there for 25 minutes with them, holding that space, right? Like, she didn't need me to say anything. She needed to know that I would be there. That's it.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go like, do you need any of that? I didn't have to crack a joke. All right. I'm not like, no, don't feel this way. I'm like, no, feel it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feel it with you. And I'm going to sit here because that's my muscle. That's my emotional muscle I get to flex. And then the best part about it is, like, when you become really, really good at it, you go from this emotion where you're literally crying the person. And then I stand up. Okay, we're good. We know our plan. Okay. Love you. You know, that whole deal. And then I turn around and it's like, all right, guys, here's what we're doing. Like, you flip that emotion and then you go to the next one. Right. And it's a muscle. If you don't use it, if you don't use that emotional muscle, you're going to lose it.
Or be very weak when you're presented with the need to actually use it.
Right. Yeah. It's a whole thing that I really, I mean, it's like that whole auto-regulation thing that we keep talking about with, like, children now, especially, like, well, they don't know how to auto-regulate and auto-regulate. Like, motherfucker, you don't know how to auto-regulate. Like, you're a grown human being.
Let's put that projection right back at you. Like, where did they learn that from?
Yeah, like, it's the same. Like, I get so angry with my son, and I'm the first person to admit, like, I will smack my son sometimes. I don't like to. I don't enjoy it. It's a natural reaction because that's how I was disciplined. I don't like doing it. Sometimes I literally do it, and I'm like, oh, God, Aaron, what are you doing? But then I wonder why he hits his sister. Because I taught him to.
Yeah.
I'm the asshole. Right? Like, what is it? AITA? Like, that's.
Yep. Am I the asshole?
Yeah, that's me. And it's like, okay, like, all right, now what do I feel? Like, okay, guilt and all that. And it's like, all right, now that I'm done with that guilt feeling, okay, now what can we do? Hey, Andrew, you know, really sorry. Like, here's, this is me being emotionally vulnerable. And he's 4. He's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, that was like
I
2
forgot
minutes ago. Like, yeah.
That might as well have been a decade ago for him.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the pure fact that, like, you keep showing it to him over and over again. It's like, all right, maybe we can heal this kind of generational trauma, because it's I don't know for a fact, but I'm sure it was very similar in your household or in some of your friends' households of just like, why didn't you do that? Like, dude, my mom's gonna beat the shit out of me if I do that. I'm not doing that. Like, okay, well, was that the best choice that we could have made? And time will tell. It might be. Right. We're still very nascent in this whole idea of, like, child psychology. Yeah. Like, 20 years from now, the answer actually might be like, nah, y'all should have hit your kids. we don't actually know. No, we don't. And people keep saying, like, no, we know. I'm like, no, we don't. The child psychology is like 60 years old.
Well, it's like with most things in the scientific world is we only know what we observe right now. And that observation may change, or our understanding of the observation will change. And let's be serious. Like, we're studying a bunch of, probably, I would say,
upper middle class white kids.
Yep.
In America.
Mm-hmm. And so we're cutting out entire populations of the world.
Yeah, not even. We're talking about 20% of our own population, let alone like the world population.
Yeah, probably less than single digits.
Yeah, science.
And trying to make determinations for everybody else based off of this.
Yeah, and we're it's the same thing I say all the time. I'm like, I teach like strength and conditioning classes and stuff, and I'm like, listen, this is what I'm going to tell you. It's certainly wrong. And they're what? And I'm like, dude, strength and conditioning is not even 100 years old.
Yeah, not even.
There's a reason that there's all these different kind of methodologies that catch on so quick, is because this has never existed before. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I've said it in one post, like, oh God, probably like a year ago. I was like, I really think us moving to cities, right? Like the city life and industrialism was the reason that fitness had to happen.
It did. 100%. There are many commentaries about all of this.
Yeah. Like, do you ever seen a farmer work out?
No.
It's called work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like,
we spend so much,
bro.
We spend so much time, especially again, in certain populations, of having to achieve fitness and health and wellness. We have to pay for it. Whereas, you don't even have to go that far in my family line. Like my dad basically is as far as back as you got to go, like having to do very physical things to survive. Like, yes, he's retiring now this year. He's getting to be in his mid 60s. Could he outlift me? 100%. Still, even though he's been slowly shrinking, doing that muscle atrophy thing that we do with sarcopenia as we age. Still, the dude could crush me in pretty much everything.
And the funny thing too, I can almost guarantee this one. Hey, Dad, you want to lift with me? No. You want to build this fence? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like want to go throw some tires on the truck? Like go do something that actually has a purpose? Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. You want to go squat? Why would I squat? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it's not the actual fact of like fitness, right? It's the moving the body thing that he actually likes to do. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of concept, and we've become so detached from that original thing of like, what is it to be fit? And then now we have sports, right, to take place of war, or not even to take place of war, and in addition to war, right, to simulate these games. And now we want to see how can we make people better at that so that we can get a competitive advantage? I fall into that all the time. My whole career is on that. Like, how do we make people better and better and better at these sports so that they can win more? That didn't exist. It was called survival. You just died.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have enough food. Like that was it. And now here we are, like sitting on our thrones and in our offices of academia, like talking about like, oh, well, our Bulgarian split squats actually more bad for the knees because they're putting more pressure on the like that's the point that we're getting.
The nuance, getting so far into the nuance that you don't actually see the whole picture.
Listen, we do these gait analyses. Analyses. Thank you. Why can't I say this word? So we do these in this lab, and it's like a $200,000 system with like these 2,400 megahertz cameras. There's 12 of them. Like, put the markers on people, right, to do a gait analysis to see how they're walking. So I put all these markers, and this happens every time. Like, I hope none of the people see this at school, actually. So we put all these markers and everything, right? We do all these like graphs and statistical things. You know what I do? I zoom out and I watch them just walk. Mm-hmm. You're swinging your hips when you walk instead of picking your knees up and actually doing this. Or you're like, you're bowing your feet out, and therefore like your hips are swinging, your knees coming inside and all that. And then I go back and I look at, and I'm like looking at all the, clicking in, and then I look and I'm like, oh yeah, it's on this graph right here. What I was talking about. There it is right there.
Mm-hmm. I can see the picture I can see the whole picture in that nuance. Like it reinforces.
We had a person here that works at the school that has a PhD in kinesiology and like physiology, right? Mm-hmm. So basically any biomechanics stuff. So like this dude knows how people move, cannot look at a human being and say what's going on. Mm. that's how distant we've become from actually using our eyeballs and then getting data to support that. Whereas now we're just like, give me the data, which that opens up a whole thing with like machine learning and large learning models. And that's a whole different puppy that we're going to need to swallow in the next 10 years.
Yep. Sounds like a good topic for a part 2 where we can wax poetic about that.
Yo, especially me with the deep stuff. Like,
yep, exactly.
We can get into it, because now it's like we're almost trying to push away from the AI.
Yeah.
Just because it's not as efficient. Like, AI does really, really good with like answers. Like, this is the answer. This is the sentence structure. Right. Yeah. Like, did it hit this person? No. Okay, good. Don't do that again. And like with long-term programming for athletes over years and years and years, there's not a data set out there that could help you with that.
It doesn't exist. We don't have the data. And so to get the data,
years old.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. In the interest of time, since I know you've got to get going, anything that you want to share with the audience, things that you're putting out into the world, things that you want people to see, where can they hear more from what you do down at LSUS and with Deep Athletics?
Yeah, so you can follow us on at Deep Athletics. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the socials. You can always follow the Human Performance Lab, so LSUS_HPL. That's where I work and run the Human Performance Lab here at LSUS. So you guys can always come to get that side. Deep Athletics is definitely like the mainstay where I put out most of our posting, education content, things like that. And yeah, you guys can always come down and visit if anybody ever wants to get into the lab and get some testing with my 2 eyes plus the data. I mean, you're more than welcome to. But yeah, you can follow us on those platforms. And I mean, shoot me an email, a message, anything like that. I'm not hard to talk to, I don't think. I mean, that's how me and you started talking.
Exactly.
I sent you a message, right?
I think I followed you because Chris had mentioned that you were doing this Deep Athletics thing. And like I was at a meet and we were chatting over Instagram pretty much immediately. Because I was like, oh, I'm doing some similar things of like trying to figure the data out. And yeah, that's how that's how these 2 humans are talking at you right now, folks.
Yeah, that was me throwing over a note over the fence to say like, hey, I just moved in.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging with me. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And yeah, I look forward to a part 2 and continue.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I just love talking to you, Jeremy. Thank you guys so much.
Likewise,
thanks for listening too. I appreciate your ears, guys.
Yeah. All right. With that, thanks, folks. Stay strong. Stay weird.